Hello, Shortcuts. Stephen here, introducing list one for Wednesday, 13th of November. This price list will go out 9 p.m. sharp Sydney time. And if you see anything here that you like the look of and you would like to receive the price list, then drop me an email, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. This is a classic rock / punk indie horror punk cosmic country list. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Now, you know I obsess over the Kickoff record, those of you who've been watching my videos for a while. And this one was really hard because on one hand, I've got probably the greatest double album of all time. And on the other, I've got maybe the greatest mini LP of all time. So where do you go? At the end of it all, I have to go with this record. I've been looking for an extra copy of this for over 2 years. This is the Japanese first press of The Clash's London Calling. Now, I'm going to do something here. This is a gatefold. Now, this, as far as I can tell, Japan was the only country that rolled this record out in gatefold. And even though there are lyrics on the inside of the gatefold, there is an additional lyric sheet in the pack. And it's quite beautiful. All of the labels are in this striking white. The record is in fantastic condition. Before I describe why I've been obsessing about getting another Japanese pressing for you all, let's just talk about this record. Why is it so compelling now, 44 years from when it was unleashed on the world? The sleeve, that play on Elvis is everything, because this is a band that delivers a statement of intent that says we are rising out of the ashes of late 70s Britain, the period of discontent, of massive unemployment, of declining standards of living across the whole of the UK, and a really turbulent period that produced very turbulent music and angry music, but also music that had poignancy and depth. And what's, I think, particularly iconic about The Clash is that anger wasn't targeted at immigrants and people who were different. It was targeted at a class that ran the country like it was a plaything and embraced the music and cultures of those around them who were in the same boat as them. So you get reggae, you get calypso, you get incredibly beautiful poignancy, you get political chars like Lost in the Supermarket, you get pride, death or glory. You get the ultimate album about London. It's perfectly named. It's perfectly conceived. You can dip into a side of this four-piece at any point and find something that you will utterly love. And that's just brilliant. And what's so good about this record is that from whether it be Paul Simonin's bass or Topper's drums or whatever it might be, it is so precise. It is so well recorded. It is one of the most dynamic rock albums ever made, which I think is part of the reason why it sounds so wonderful on vinyl. And the Japanese press of this record is spectacular. It is undoubtedly one of the best sounding albums in my collection. Any of you on the club who come to my listing room, ask me to play something from the Japanese press of London Calling. It's absolutely magical. It's really hard to find in good condition. The shipping costs from Japan are pretty painful at the minute. But I found one that's in fantastic nick. Spanish Bombs, Clamp Down, Revolution Rock, Death or Glory, The Card Cheat. What a beautiful track. It's just amazing. The kind of the embrace, but not in a clinical kind of let's call it empire building way of reggae in the likes of Jim Really Can't Fail. It is a love. It's a love affair with music. It's just brilliant. And, this album deserves all its accolades, and its copy is fantastic. If you don't have a killer London Calling in your collection, treat yourself to this. It's not cheap. I'm telling you now, it's not cheap. But if you want to buy yourself an amazing Christmas present, you could do a lot worse. Now, the Japanese have kind of a lock on this. Oh, I will say, the UK first press, I have a copy of it too. It's not quite as, in my opinion, I don't love it quite as much as I love the Japanese one, just because the vinyl is that little bit noisier. The Japanese vinyl just really suits the dynamic range of this record, and it is absolutely superb. Yeah, there you go. So, you might ask, what could possibly compete with the Clash London Calling? Well, I'm telling you, this was a genuine debate, because record number 2 is the European first press of REM's Chronic Town. Now, just over 30 minutes, 6 songs? Recorded at the drive-in studio in Winston-Salem in October 1981, produced by Mitch Easter. This is the album that introduced the world to a new sound. REM from Athens, Georgia. Michael Stipe, Mike Mills, Peter Buck, and it's just a legendary band. And this album, this mini album, was just so precise in terms of the lyrical ambiguity that still hinted at a sense of longing and trying to build a connection. The single that preceded it, Radio Free Europe, is an example of what REM did all the way through the best of their career, which was to create an absolute earworm. Radio Free Europe is incredibly catchy, but also lyrically obscure, and the rhythms on the drums and just everything about it is so different to what was around at the time. I compare. I mean, it was almost released around at the same time as the Clash London Calling, and they're miles apart. And of course, they went on shortly afterwards to make Murmur, which is just spectacular. But Chronic Town was great, and this is a European first press. Carnival of Sorts, Stumble. I love the early IRS label as well, before they moved, was it to Warner's? Look at that. In fantastic condition. You can play this so loud. It's great. I don't know. I think a legit call for one of the greatest, if not the greatest, mini LPs ever. So there's 2 records to kick things off that I just utterly love. So what do you do next? Well, I've got some classics, and these are classics for a reason. For those of you who maybe haven't watched as many videos as others, in Club Shortcuts, I've coined this phrase over the last few years, which is Shortcuts royalty, which signifies an album or a series of records that the feedback and consensus from the group are that they're pretty outstanding. And I'm in quite regular communication with the team in Shinjuku, and so they're pretty good at picking out some of these things. And so this is a really, really, really nice copy of the P8005A Led Zeppelin 3 that I know a lot of you have and a lot of you really like. What I really like about this copy is, firstly, it's a beautiful copy, but the team have inserted this. Now, we all know, those of us in Shortcuts, that Led Zeppelin released singles in Japan. And this, you won't be too surprised to find, is the single of the Immigrant Song. And side 2 of, or side B, because it's a single, is the rather rare Hey Hey What Can I Do, which was only released much later on record. It's obviously got the flywheel, typical Japan. The record's in wonderful condition. Led Zeppelin 3 complete with the Immigrant Song on single. That's pretty good, isn't it? So I'm just gonna kind of put this one out there too, because this, I think, is the best of the Led Zeppelin 1 represses. Now, there are a series of they're called they're labels. The matrix starts MT. The early versions of Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 3 on Japanese vinyl, the first presses, have a different colored label, and they're stupendously expensive. 4 or 5 times the price of the represses. So what I've been studiously doing is figuring out what are the represses that are as close to the truth as possible. And this one's got really excellent feedback. P10105A for those of you who want to go and do a bit of investigation. So there you have a really nice Japanese Led Zeppelin 3 with single, and on any given day I vary, but I will very regularly tell you that Led Zeppelin 1 is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. All right, now let's do a turn into something wildly different. Couple of records, 3 records in a row, 4 records in a row, 5 records in a row that are completely, madly, wildly different. So let's start with this. Robert Palmer's Clues. Now, I suspect there's not many of you out there that have this in your collection. But here's the thing. Those of you who do are shouting at me right now again, I have it, it's great, it's so good. And it is. It's the Japanese white label promo of Robert Palmer's Clues. I think it's like a 3rd, 4th album, maybe even 5th. But what you've got is this magical mix of new wave, kind of rock, a bit of calypso, reggae, like The Clash. Robert Palmer was consuming influences, and his voice was so supple and so beautiful that he could make it work. Now, there's a couple of tracks on this record that are worthy of the price of entry alone. Now, the opening track, Looking for Clues, is genuinely great, but Johnny and Mary, the 3rd track on side 1, is, I think, one of the great new wave tracks ever. Ever. It is. He sings it in a lower register. The drums and the keyboard supplement him, and it's kept so low key yet so rhythmically driving. The chorus is beautiful. There's a couple of places where he kind of pauses and the music kind of fills the gaps. He does some really subtle things that make this almost a little bit off, but perfectly off. And yeah, Robert Palmer's Clues white label promo. I love it. All right. Now here's a band you wouldn't be expecting to see on my list. This is, I don't know, 4th or 5th or 6th album by horror punk band, the Misfits. Now you can't see this because of the way this is, but you're just going to believe me on this. This is a really wild 3D image. It was a 2011 Record Store Day special release. It is rare as anything. It's a really nice example of kind of horror punk. Jerry only bass vocals. Des, it's got its fans. It may not be kind of upper echelon Misfits, but this one is finding its place, finding its home. And for those of you who love this genre, again, with Christmas coming, it's not a cheap record just because of what it cost me to get it, but it is really a special package. So if you want to know more about that record, just drop me a line. All right. Now, I was doing some research on the consensus around some of the mid 2000 kind of 14, 15, 16 Mobile Fidelity records, because I know there's a few of you out there who like your Mobile Fidelity presses. I have a really interesting one here. It is the 2015 Mobile Fidelity release of John Wesley Harding. Double LP. I don't think it's 45 RPM. I could be wrong though. It is number 2583. One of Dylan's kind of typical about faces, but I'm sure many of you know the album, so I'm not going to talk about that. But I'm going to talk about what I noticed between playing this version of John Wesley Harding and the mono version. This is the stereo. I've got the mono one on my shelf. I think that MOFI have done a really, really good job of elevating this music. The Aussie press that I had for years was so muggy and so muddy that I decided it was an album I didn't like. And it's really only because that, for various reasons, I found myself with a couple of copies of the Mobile Fidelity, that I've given myself the time to learn to love that record. And I think that's probably the best thing that I can say about the Mobile Fidelity press. All right, moving on. I love my Cosmic Country. And this is an interesting one. The Flying Burrito Brothers. This is Last of the Red Hot Burritos. Double LP. Japanese hard copy with details on all the various members of the Burrito Brothers, from Graham Parsons and beyond. Musicians: Al Perkins, Chris Hillman, Michael Clark. Recorded at Electric Lady Studios and recorded live, which makes it really deeply interesting. Very lovely press, the first press on the dark green NM Records label. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this band. If you like your Cosmic Country, then it'll fit in any collection. Okay, what have I got? I've got 4 more to go. Very quickly. George Thorogood and the Destroyers. Kind of blues rock. Exploded really out of the late 70s. This is his 3rd album. Now, I wouldn't typically have George on the main list. It would typically be in the specials. But the reason I'm pulling this one out is because this was his 3rd release, and it was, released in 78, 79, but it was recorded in 74. before they had a contract. And therefore, it's a lot rawer and more dynamic and not quite as fixated on just the pummeling guitar. It's actually, it's almost punkish, but there are some spectacular blues cover versions. And so I'm just going to call out a couple because, Howlin' for My Darlin' was originally, I'm pretty sure it was Willie Dixon. And they do absolutely, compelling version of that song. And the final track actually is my favorite, which is a cover version of John Lee Hooker's Huckle Up Baby, which I think means it deserves its place on the main list because I think it's actually a really fine record and I think it's their best. So there you go. All right, now here's another white label promo. This is Herman Brood and the Wild Romance, and the album is called Go Nuts, which is also the title track and was also the hit, which was a massive hit in Holland or the Netherlands, where this band is from. Now, this band never really made it outside of the Netherlands. But when you listen to them, this is a really nice copy of White Label Promo, Japanese First Press. It's aged really quite well. If you really like that kind of rhythmic driven rock music from the late 70s, I think you might be really pleasantly surprised by that. And obviously it's not very expensive and it's really rather surprisingly good. All right. There's always a debate as to what is the best Jam album. And there's this fallacy that they never made good records, that they only made good singles. Well, I'm going to call bollocks on that because I think that's just not true. This is Setting Suns, which features some of those great singles. It features, for example, Going Underground, Heatwave, Eating Rifles. A lot of people think that, this is the inner by the way, that All Mod Cons is maybe the greatest Jam album. That's the original Polydor label. I tell you what, it's a good debate. I think there are some clunkers on some of the albums, but that doesn't make an album bad just because it has something that doesn't live up to Going Underground or the Eating Rifles. But Setting Sun's Japanese First Press is a very fine sounding record indeed. And then I am just going to finish very quickly on this album. I've been listening to this a little bit more recently because one of my friends said it was the best Midnight Oil album. It is 10-1. I don't know if it's the best. I think the best for me will always be Blue Sky Mining just because of what it meant to me growing up in Ireland. But what I do think this album has is a collection of start to finish, incredibly strong, politically incisive, and hopeful songs. And I think in the week that we've had, which I'm trying my best to delete, I played that album this afternoon and I enjoyed jumping around to it and doing my chores. Midnight Oils, 10-1. All right, there we have this week's list. If you would like to be on the price list, drop me an email, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. There's a genre list to come, which I think you'll enjoy as well. As always, thank you so much, and talk to you soon. Bye.